All right. Hey, good afternoon, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Monday, November 11th, 2024. Happy Veterans Day to everybody. We are still tracking the tropics here late into the November part of the season. Normally, the tropics have pretty much shut down by this point. But of course, the 2024 hurricane season, which is now officially a hyperactive season after the little bit of energy that Rafael gave us, is still looking to produce yet another storm as we work into this week and even into next week. We'll have something to watch down here once again in the Caribbean Sea. So looking at the satellite presentation here today, overall pretty quiet. Again, Rafael no longer an issue. The storm pretty much dried out and got sheared apart across the central Gulf of Mexico. Very strange track. We talked about it up until about its landfall with Cuba. It basically turned pretty quick away from Cuba, gained a little bit of latitude, and then just kind of did this loop as it dried out and ran out of steering current and pretty much fell apart. We don't have any other named storms or areas of interest, in the immediate concern today. But what we're watching over the next couple of days is this area of disturbed weather south of Hispaniola. This is a very vigorous tropical wave for this time of year, and it is moving slowly off to the west. By this point in the season, the easterly trade winds are starting to weaken a little bit as these stronger big cold fronts come down, especially this right now. We've had generally a very progressive trough pattern over the western U.S., a big ridge over the eastern U.S., and another big trough over the mid-Atlantic. So getting storms to move across this area has been slow going because the easterlies keep getting interrupted. But we do have this area of interest that's going to be moving slowly off to the west over the next couple of days. And in the vicinity of the Western Caribbean, the Cayman Islands, Jamaica, and even south of Western Cuba, we think that we're going to see another storm develop. So let's go ahead and look at the National Hurricane Center's current look. They have disturbance 1 here, 50% chance of development in the next 7 days. So we talked about this on the page a couple days ago, and I said that this probably wouldn't be an issue for the U.S. However, unfortunately, that no longer appears to be the case because I was expecting something to form more over where it is now and then maybe take back off to the east. But it looks like this wave is going to make it further west than we initially thought. And because of all the kind of chaos of the fall weather patterns, it looks like this is going to make it far enough over where it might be able to slip up into the Gulf of Mexico, kind of like Rafael did. So unfortunately, this is going to be something that we're going to have to track for some follow-on land impacts. Looking over on Tropical Tidbit satellite presentation a little bit closer today, we can investigate our wave a little bit better. One of the first things you'll note is that we still have some deep moist flow from the Pacific moving across Central America and into the Caribbean, where we have this wave axis kind of tilted back with height as we go along here towards Hispaniola, and some scattered thunderstorm activity, and even what looks like a little mid-level vortex continues to show on this thing. This is probably not on the surface. In fact, the low-level cloud pattern does not suggest it's anything more than kind of a tropical wave that looks like this, but there has been a nice little vigorous mid-level vortex with this for the last couple of days, even when it moved through the Antilles, and it's kind of parked itself just south of Haiti today. And again, this is going to generally progress steadily westward over the next 3 or 4 days. And when it gets in the vicinity of the Western Caribbean, it looks like conditions are going to be a little bit more favorable. It'll be a little bit further away from this kind of old frontal boundary that's nearby. This is much colder air off to the north here. So once it gets away from all this and gets in a little more favorable condition, we think this very well could develop. Looking at the models for the next couple of days, GEFS, mean sea level pressure ensemble here. As we click through, we go into Tuesday and Wednesday, we still see very little, signal for development as it passes by Jamaica. But as we go into Thursday and Friday, this looks like when the window is going to open. Both GFS and Euro pretty confident that by the end of this week, we should begin to see a surface low starting to form, start seeing some more rotation. And this is all also associated with an upper level high, or a high pressure that's going to be moving across the southeast at this time frame. This is going to push some stronger winds down into the Caribbean, and this gives us our background vorticity. It kind of helps it kick off with that rotation and spin. Remember, our low down here wants to rotate this way, so when the winds come down from that high, they wrap around into the low, and then you kind of have the ridge over the low, and you kind of start getting that rotation going. Same thing that kicked off Rafael, likely to kick this one off as well, which I believe would be Sarah is the next name on our list in the 2024 naming list. So let's go ahead and go to Thursday morning on the GFS, kind of investigate what we're looking at here. So we have a low beginning to develop just off the coast of Central America, and you start having that system develop. Now, it looks like it may get kind of close to land. GFS kind of, indicates that it won't move a whole lot going in through the weekend. And during that time frame, the overall weather pattern looks looks pretty good. We have an upper level high over the Caribbean with very little wind shear. So as you can see here, as we go the next couple of days, it looks like a progressive series of troughs will move over. And although it may have some influence and some interference at times, it generally looks like a high is going to stay north of the area, and it may even help ventilate the system a little bit. And that should give the storm some time to breathe. And moisture looks very good as well. All the dry air rides north of the system. There are a few pulses of dry air, which that could be a bit of a hindrance as we go into Saturday, Sunday. That could hinder the storm a little bit. This is one of the problems with the storms this time of year is there's very dry air that comes in with these cold fronts. So on the GFS, it's kind of keeping it mixed out, but it would depend how strong the storm was. If it kind of festered and didn't organize as quick as we think, that dry air might be an issue. If it's not, then, well, it might be able to fend it off if it's a little bit stronger. So by the early part of next week, GFS and European models both seem to have really good agreement on the fact that by basically a week from today, we will have a hurricane in the Western Caribbean trying to begin to move north as the steering flows kind of relax from the cold front that's coming towards this weekend, and then the next front coming upstream the week towards the end of next week. So the GFS and Euro, really good agreement here. 985 on the GFS, 974 on the Euro. Again, still in the Western Caribbean, just southwest of southwest of the Cayman Islands. And then the models begin to move the storm northward as we work into the middle of next week. Tuesday and Wednesday, you see a series. There's a cold front back across the plains, cold front offshore. It looks like there's going to be a window for this to start moving northward. GFS brings a hurricane near the western tip of Cuba in the middle of the week, the 12Z time frame there. And then 12Z on Wednesday of next week, same thing. European shows us moving very close to the western tip of Cuba. Europe takes a little bit different path, but they're still kind of in that same vein there. And they're both showing a fairly significant chance for a hurricane. And what's really interesting is we get this thing near the Florida Keys on the middle of next week, like that Wednesday, kind of Thursday time frame. And both models on Thursday have this sitting there as a 965 millibar hurricane, or 965 on 18Z on Wednesday. GFS is like a little bit slower, but both models indicate that we could probably see a hurricane moving near the Florida Keys around this time frame. This is just one model solution. There's about 100 things that could happen with this. It's just funny that the models are in very good agreement on this. This is also a very common wintertime pattern to see a storm form in the Western Caribbean, and then as it tries to come out, a cold front sweeps down and pushes it back off to the east quickly. So Rafael was a very unusual case where the storm was able to move off to the west, but that doesn't usually happen. The reason Rafael was able to do that is because our weather pattern is very reminiscent of early fall because it's been so warm, whereas it looks like we'll have a cool down at the end of this week we're in right now. And as we work into this next week where we're talking about the time frame for the storm potentially trying to move up towards the Gulf of Mexico, we could have another pretty significant cold front as this pattern likely begins to flip. We've been very warm for a while, and a basic rule of thumb is if you've been warm for a while in the winter, cold fronts are going to come back at some point. And it looks like next week is when our first big cold front might come in. What's also curious is that the models have very different agreements on what they see as far as an upper level weather pattern goes. This is the European model, shows a storm near the Florida Keys next Wednesday, about 9 days from now. And it shows this little more weaker trough and shortwave digging into the western Texas area with another trough offshore. GFS shows this like massive winter storm low coming in to the western central U.S. on the same time frame, but still has the storm in roughly the same place. Massive disagreement on the pattern, but fairly uniform agreement on the placement and timing of the storm. Very interesting. Now, does this mean that there's a hurricane coming for the Florida Keys next week? By no means, not yet. Models are, as far as indicating the potential here, show that basically, yes, we will see something slowly develop in the Western Caribbean, and then it will eventually begin to recurve. Now, where it recurves exactly, who knows? It could recurve more over central Cuba and the Bahamas. It could come further east and come west and come all the way back and over to western Florida and quickly get picked up by that front. It could pass over South Florida. I mean, there's a couple different options here. GFS forecast lays that out. European model, I think the forecast only goes to 240. So I don't know how many European ensembles we get, but yeah, same thing. General pattern of something recurving. And again, it could be a sharp recurve where it just graces the Florida Keys. It could be so far as to go over Cuba and not be a threat. It really depends where the storm wanders in the next couple of days and then the timing of that next cold front. And 9 days out, we're not going to know that right now. We're not. There's no way to know that. But the big takeaway today is that, yes, we do have another storm to track. It's going to be a while. We're going to be talking about this for another week plus, so people get tired of it. They're like, well, you've been talking about the storm for like forever. What's going on? And it's just because we can lean this far ahead. But this does appear to be some threat to the U.S., especially for South Florida. Rest of the eastern Gulf of Mexico, the rest of the peninsula of Florida may still have to watch. It's going to depend on timing. It's going to depend on intensity. It's going to depend on final track. It's going to depend on a lot of small scale variables that we simply cannot forecast right now. But we need to still be prepared. And if you're in South Florida, especially Southwest Florida and the Florida Keys, you need to be watching this one carefully. And we will, be watching it throughout the week. We'll watch for trends. We'll watch for things here and there. We'll have Hurricane Hunter data when it starts forming, probably towards the end of this week, and this weekend. So we'll have a lot more to talk about as the week goes on. We're probably not going to have a video every day on it, but once it starts forming, we will then. So that's what I got for you guys today on your Monday. As always, thanks for watching and have a good one.